Welcome back to the Old West Tales, where every story whispers secrets of love, heartbreak, and redemption. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. I'm curious which part of the world my viewers are from. Sit back and let me take you on a journey that might just melt your heart tonight. The sharp crack of a whip echoed across the dry land, cutting through the silence like a blade. Naira collapsed to her knees, her wrists bound tightly with rough rope that had already torn into her skin. Blood trickled down in thin, uneven streams, mixing with dust beneath her. Bruises covered her back and shoulders, some fresh, others dark and fading, each one telling the story of a cruelty that refused to end. The sun above burned mercilessly, its light stabbing into her eyes every time she tried to lift her head. In front of her stood Victor Kane, a man who had once entered her mother's life with soft words and promises, now breathing heavily as he held the whip in his hand. "That lamb belongs to me," he snarled. "Do you hear me? Sign it, Naira. Sign it, and I will let you go." She struggled to breathe, her voice barely holding together. "That land belongs to my mother." The next strike came down with brutal force, and her scream tore through the empty prairie. Her body crumpled, but her eyes, though filled with pain, did not yield. Victor tossed the paper onto the ground beside her, his voice dripping with venom. "Not signing? Fine. Let the sun finish the job." He laughed dryly, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving her behind like something already dead. The wind whispered across the land, carrying nothing but silence in her ragged breaths. Naira's skin burned beneath the sun, her throat dry beyond measure. Each breath felt like swallowing broken glass. She lifted her face toward the sky, her lips cracked and trembling. "Mother, if you can see me, you know I would never give him what's yours." The faint sound of hooves broke through the stillness. Rowan Hale, a lone rancher, pulled his horse to a stop, narrowing his eyes through the dust. He saw her tied to the fence, barely alive, and something long buried inside him stirred. He dismounted without hesitation, drew his knife, and cut the ropes binding her. Her body slumped forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. Without a word, Rowan lifted her onto his horse. The sun still burned overhead, but now she was no longer alone in it. The evening wind carried the scent of dry grass as Rowan rode steadily toward his cabin. Naira lay motionless in front of him, her wrists raw, her clothes stained with blood. Her hair clung to her shoulders, moving slightly with the rhythm of the horse. When they reached the cabin, Rowan carried her inside and laid her gently on the wooden bed. He fetched water and began cleaning her wounds, each touch careful, each movement deliberate. Every time the damp cloth met her skin, she let out a faint sound, somewhere between pain and exhaustion. She did not wake. The dim light of the lamp cast shadows across Rowan's face, revealing a man hardened by years and silence. When he saw the deep rope marks on her wrists, something inside him tightened. It reminded him too much of the past, the blood, the helplessness, the loss he had never truly escaped. Years ago, he had carried someone just like this, his wife, after raiders burned their home and left nothing behind but ashes. Since that day, Rowan Hale had lived alone, his life reduced to a cabin, a rifle, and land that felt more like a memory than a home. That night, the wind howled against the walls. Rowan sat outside on the porch, staring into the endless sky. Inside, Naira's breathing remained faint but steady. He listened to it like it was the only thing grounding him to the present. The next morning, light crept softly into the cabin. Naira stirred, her body trembling as she woke. Her eyes sharpened instantly, filled with the instinct of someone who had survived too much. Rowan stayed where he was, keeping his distance. "Don't be afraid," he said quietly. "You're safe here." She looked around slowly, taking the small room, the scent of wood and ash, the open land beyond the window. "Who are you?" she asked. "Just someone who lives nearby," he replied. She hesitated, then asked the question that had kept her alive all this time. "Are you going to take me back to him?" Rowan turned slightly, his voice steady. "If I wanted to, you wouldn't be here." The sunlight fell across her face, revealing the exhaustion and strength that existed side by side within her. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again, quieter this time. "Rest. No one is going to touch you again." With that, he stepped outside, closing the door gently behind him. For the first time in years, something inside him had shifted, something that felt dangerously close to purpose. The second morning after a rescue, Naira woke to the soft warmth of sunlight filtering through the window. The pain in her body remained, but it was different now, no longer accompanied by fear. On the table sat a bowl of water and a piece of bread. Rowan was gone, likely tending to his work. She touched her wrist, wincing as a memory of ropes and pain returned. Slowly, she curled into herself and wept, silently, the kind of crying that came not from weakness but from survival. When the door opened, Rowan stepped inside, carrying water. He paused when he saw her, then set the bucket down carefully. "You need to drink," he said. She studied him, uncertain, then reached the cup and took small, careful sips. The water eased her throat, bringing her back to herself little by little. Days passed. Rowan spoke little, but he made sure she had food and water. Naira began to move around the cabin, exploring cautiously. She found an old guitar covered in dust, a rack of worn ammunition, and a faded photograph of a woman and child. "Your family?" she asked softly. Rowan went still for a moment before answering. "They're gone." The weight in his voice was enough to end the conversation. That evening, Naira lit the fire and made a simple meal. Rowan watched quietly, something softening in his expression. Later, as he prepared to sleep outside, she asked, "Why did you save me?" He paused. "Because I couldn't watch that happen again." She looked at him for a long moment. "Men like you are rare," she whispered. Rowan didn't reply. He simply looked out over the land as the moonlight settled across it. Inside, Naira sat by the fire. The fear hadn't disappeared, but something new had begun to take its place. Something fragile, something unfamiliar. Trust. By midday, the desert wind had begun to rise, whipping red dust across the open land and rattling the newly set fence posts. The sound of distant hoofbeats broke through the air, slow at first, then growing heavier, more certain. It was the kind of sound that carried warning, the kind that made the land itself seem to hold its breath. Rowan Hale stood behind the barn, splitting firewood, but the moment he heard it, he stopped. His eyes narrowed toward the trail, already knowing what was coming. 3 riders emerged from the dust. At the front rode Victor Kane, his black coat flaring behind him like a shadow. 2 armed men followed close behind. Inside the cabin, Naira froze. The sound alone was enough to send a wave of fear crashing through her. The cup in her hand slipped, hitting the floor with a dull crack. Her breath came fast and shallow as memories flooded back. The pain, the heat, the whip. Rowan stepped onto the porch, his Winchester rifle already in his hands. Victor pulled his horse to a stop at the gate, a crooked smile stretching across his face. "Heard you've been keeping something of mine, Hale," he called out. Rowan stood still, his expression unreadable. "She's not a thing," he replied. Victor laughed under his breath and dropped his cigarette into the dirt, crushing it beneath his boot. "She's Helen's girl. Her mother promised me that land. Now the girl owns it, so I've come to collect." The words cut through the air like a blade. Naira stepped into the doorway, her hand trembling, but her eyes burned with a fierce anger. "My mother never promised you anything," she said. Victor turned toward her slowly, his smile cold and dangerous. "You think you know everything?" he said. "I knew her better than you ever did." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "If you don't sign that land over, I'll burn this place down just like I burned hers." Rowan's grip tightened on the rifle. "Try it," he said quietly. The wind surged, throwing dust against her clothes as the tension stretched tight between them. Victor's men rested their hands near their guns, waiting. For a moment, everything stood still. Then Victor let out a short laugh and pulled back on his reins. "We'll see how long you can keep her safe," he said before turning his horse. The 3 riders disappeared into the dust, leaving behind a lingering smell of tobacco and threat. Rowan lowered his rifle slowly, though his eyes remained fixed on the horizon. Behind him, Naira stepped onto the porch, her breathing uneven. "He'll come back," she said. "I know." Rowan nodded once. "Next time, I'll be ready." The wind carried his words across the land, but neither of them found comfort in them. They both understood what was coming. That night, the desert fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of wind pushing against the cabin walls. Inside, the dim glow of an oil lamp flickered across Naira's face as she sat near the stove. Her hands trembled slightly, though her voice remained steady. "He didn't come for me because of anger," she said quietly. "He came for the land." Rowan watched her, his expression darkening. "Tell me?" Naira drew in a slow breath, her eyes fixed on the fire. "My mother owned the only land in this region with a deep well. It could survive drought. When everything else dried up, people wanted it. He wanted it." Her fingers tightened against her shirt. "After my father died, my mother fought to keep it. Then Victor came. He helped at first, brought water, fixed fences, said all the right things. He made her trust him." Her voice dropped, but he was waiting. Rowan remained silent, letting her speak. "One day, I went down to the stream. When I came back, the house was burning. My mother was still inside. Her breath faltered. They said it was an accident, but I saw the tracks. I knew it was him." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Weeks later, he came back with papers, said the land was mine now and demanded I sign it over. When I refused, he tied me up and left me in the sun to die. The room fell quiet except for the low crackle of fire. Rowan's jaw tightened, his eyes hard as steel. "And you didn't give in," he said. Naira shook her head. "I'd rather die than let him take what she fought for." Rowan stepped closer, his voice low but unwavering. "Then he won't take it. Not while I'm here." She looked at him, uncertainty and something else, something softer, flickering in her eyes. "Why would you risk that?" she asked. Rowan didn't hesitate. "Because it's right." Outside, the wind howled louder, but inside the cabin, something steadied. The fear was still there, but it no longer stood alone. The next day, the air felt heavy, thick with heat and tension. A flock of crows circled above, their cries echoing across the land. Rowan checked the rounds in his rifle, his movements calm but precise. He didn't need to look up when the sound of hooves returned. He knew. Victor came again, flanked by his 2 men. This time, there was no hesitation, no pretense. Rowan stepped onto the porch, rifle ready, his shadow stretching across the ground. Victor dismounted slowly, his expression darker now. "Still playing hero?" he called out. Rowan's voice came back steady as stone. "You here to talk or to die?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Victor spat into the dirt and stepped forward. "I'm here to take what's mine." The cabin door burst open behind Rowan as Naira stepped out, her fists clenched, her voice sharp and unafraid. "That land is not yours," she shouted. "My mother died because of you, and I'm not afraid anymore." Victor's eyes hardened. "You don't know what fear is," he snapped. "I gave your mother everything." The click of Rowan's rifle echoed through the air. "That's enough," Rowan said, his voice low and dangerous. The moment shattered. Gunfire erupted, loud and violent. One of Victor's men fell instantly as Rowan fired. Dust exploded into the air as bullets tore through the ground. Rowan moved quickly, taking cover and firing again, but shot tore through his shoulder, blood staining his shirt. Naira cried out, but instead of retreating, she grabbed a revolver from inside the cabin and stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her aim held. She fired once, then again. The second man dropped. Victor staggered back, raising his gun, but Rowan was already standing, his rifle aimed straight at him. "It's over," Rowan said. Victor's confidence faltered, his breathing uneven. "You won't shoot," he said. "You're not that man." Rowan stepped forward, his voice cold. "No, but she deserves justice." Instead of pulling the trigger, he struck Victor hard with the rifle, knocking him to the ground. He bound his hands with rope, the same kind that had once held Naira captive. Naira stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "This land will never be yours," she said firmly. The wind rose again, sweeping dust across the ground as Rowan stood beside her. The fight was over, but everything had changed. Evening settled slowly over the prairie, painting the sky in deep shades of bronze and fading gold. The scent of gunpowder lingered in the air, mixing with dust and the metallic trace of blood. Victor Kane lay in the yard, bound tightly, his breath uneven as dark stains spread beneath him. The silence didn't last long. Soon, the sound of hoofbeats returned, but this time it carried something different, authority, not threat. Sheriff Wade arrived with 2 ranchers at his side. His eyes scanned the scene carefully. Rowan Hale standing tall despite the blood soaking through his shoulder, and Naira beside him, her dark hair tangled by the wind, her face marked by exhaustion and something stronger, resolve. "What happened here, Hale?" the sheriff asked, his tone measured. Rowan didn't hesitate. "I did what he forced me to do." The sheriff dismounted and knelt beside Victor, who let out a weak, bitter laugh. "They ambushed me," he rasped. "Try to take what's mine." Before he could twist the truth any further, Naira stepped forward. Her voice was steady, cutting through the tension. "No one took anything from you. This land belonged to my mother." She pulled out a folded document, its edges worn and darkened by fire. "She left it to me." Sheriff Wade unfolded the paper carefully, reading each line in silence. When he looked up again, his expression had hardened. "That's enough," he said coldly. "Victor Kane, you're under arrest for attempted murder and unlawful seizure of property." The 2 ranchers moved in, pulling Victor to his feet as he struggled and cursed, his voice raw with fury. "This land should have been mine. And you," he spat toward Rowan, "you're nothing but a broken man hiding behind her." Rowan didn't react. His gaze remained steady, unmoved. "No," he said quietly. "I'm just doing what should have been done a long time ago." The sheriff gave a slight nod before leading the group away, their figures slowly disappearing into the distance. As the sound of hooves faded, the land fell silent once more. Naira stood still, her fists clenched at her sides, her eyes glistening in the last light of day. "You saved me," she said softly. "But more than that, you gave me back something I thought was gone." Rowan stepped closer, placing a careful hand on her shoulder. "No one should lose everything because of someone else's greed," he said. "You and this land, you both deserve to live." The wind moved gently through the fields, carrying with it a quiet sense of release. For the first time, the past felt a little further away. Days later, the first rain arrived. At first, it was just a soft tapping against the tin roof, hesitant and light. Then it grew into a steady downpour, washing away the dust that had clung stubbornly to land for so long. Rowan stood on the porch, watching as the earth drank deeply, the scent of wet soil rising into the air. Where there had once been blood and broken ground, small patches of green began to appear. The fence had been rebuilt, the stable repaired. Life was returning. Inside the cabin, Naira lit a fire. The warm glow flickered across her face, illuminating the faint scars that still marked her skin. But they no longer defined her. They were reminders of what she had endured and survived. She stepped outside, carrying a cup of hot coffee, and handed it to Rowan. "The rain is back," she said softly, a small smile forming for the first time. Rowan nodded, his voice quieter now, warmer. "And this land remembers you." They sat together on the porch steps, letting the rain soak into their clothes, neither of them moving away. In the distance, a few riders passed along the road. This time, they tipped their hats in respect. Naira watched them go, something like hope reflecting in her eyes. "Do you think they'll accept me?" she asked quietly. Rowan didn't hesitate. "They will," he said. "In time, they'll see you belong here." The rain fell harder, darkening her hair and clothes, but she didn't move. Instead, she looked at him, her voice softer now. "I'm still afraid." Rowan met her gaze. "That doesn't mean you're alone anymore." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm began to ease, and beyond it, the sky opened just enough to reveal a golden light breaking through. They sat side by side, watching as the land transformed before them. No longer something to fight over, but something to protect, to grow, to live with. For Rowan, it was the first time in years that the weight of loss had lifted, even if only slightly. For Naira, it was the beginning of something she had nearly forgotten existed, a future. Because sometimes the harshest lands don't just take. Sometimes they give something back, not all at once, and never easily, but enough to remind those who endure that life can still grow, even after everything has been burned away. And in that quiet place, Beneath a sky washed clean by rain, two souls who've been shaped by loss found a reason to stay. I love all of you, my wonderful audience of Wild West Tales. Tell me how this story made you feel. Leave a comment below. Type 1 if you love this story. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic tales from the wild.